Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. On this episode of Playas Guide, I'm going to be talking about investing in video games and if you should do it or if you shouldn't. So for me, I'm not really into investing in video games. I collect them because I appreciate these games for what they are. I like to play games, and you probably already know this from watching this channel. But there are people out there who buy games and sometimes hold on to them and flip them, and they see them as an investment, whether it's short term or long term. So, one thing you want to decide right away is that's something that you're interested in doing because there is some risk involved. For me, some of the games I have, if they've gone up in value, it's only because I bought them nearly 20 years ago. So there's really only one direction for them to go, and that's up because they were dirt cheap at that time. So that's something you want to consider, if you're looking at collecting and wanting to get rare or valuable games before they, are kind of out of reach and too expensive for you. A good example of what I'm talking about here is the NES market. So NES games in about 2012, I'm going to say, roughly around that time. You could say 2011 or 13, but around that time, the nostalgia factor hit the NES hard and game values started to increase. More and more people took notice of this, including Nintendo, who released various things like the NES Remix and the NES Classic, and some different throwback titles and different throwback indie games came out, which further pushed this market to, its heights. Eventually, it reached a point where people are just not able to buy some of these games. Your average person didn't have the money for a copy of Little Samson or Flintstone Surprise at Dinosaur Peak because they were put so high on the pedestal in terms of value and rarity that this caused a bit of a plateau, which I think is where the market should really be at this time. And this is probably what's going to occur with a lot of other consoles, depending on the nostalgia factor and generation of gamers. So, when you're buying or collecting to invest, you want to look at these past trends that we've seen and look at what is really undervalued currently and will probably go up in value because it doesn't really have too many other directions to go. And if you are looking to flip games, unless you buy that one rare game and you're banking on it going up consistently in value, you're probably going to have to fill your garage or, some Rubbermaid bins with these games and hold on to them for a long time because it can usually take around 10 years, about a decade or longer, before some of this stuff can really go up in value and people appreciate it. Something else that you're really going to want to pay attention to in terms of investing in games is the quality and condition of the games that you're buying. If you're buying a sealed game or CIB, nicks and tears simply will not do. The value of those games are not going to hold up very well over time in comparison to the mint copies. The same can be said for loose cartridges, or complete disc games. The cracked jewel case, you're going to want to replace that if you can. Because that's what collectors are going to look for. And if you're going to sell to somebody, it's probably going to be a collector. And in terms of longevity, they want the best in their collection. So condition matters. So I think overall, rare games will always increase. Whether it hits some highs and lows over time, rare games will stand out as rare titles and always be desired. Common games, however, could go up at some point or slowly increase, but that could also happen where they slowly go down or just drop down to becoming sort of worthless again. The one thing to be said about that is there are a lot of common games that are highly desirable. So when that nostalgia factor or that generation of gamers gets into collecting for that console, that's when you're going to see those games, hit some of their highest values. I guess the best example would be a game like a Mario game or a Zelda game. Something that's really mainstream and popular will never really be worthless as long as there's a fan base for it. When you're looking at collecting or investing to collect, you want to look at hype surrounding collecting. So if something's super hot and popular to collect for, or everybody's going for a certain, type of game, or everybody's going for sealed games, that might not be the best thing to do, because a lot of times, hype doesn't last long. It kind of creates a bubble, just like we've seen with past games. For a good example of that would be something like Devil's Third, where the game was at one time, I think, selling for around $200 the week of its release, and then a few weeks later it dropped down to like $100. I think there might have been a reprint for that game, but that aside, the fact that it skyrocketed so high in value because collectors wanted to have it in their collection so bad, and then it dropped down to half of that, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, buying into the hype. Sometimes that ship may sail and you miss out. That's too bad. There's plenty of other chances, but more often than not, hyped up collecting doesn't hold its value for very long, and you don't want to be stuck being that person who severely overpaid for a specific game. So something to think about is short-term collectors. I think I've mentioned this before in one of my past videos. Short-term collectors can really drive up the value of games. So people who are collecting for a certain generation because, they want that nostalgia factor, but they're not really interested or passionate about those games. They're going to buy them, and then they're going to, that nostalgia is going to take its course. It's going to run its course. Then they're going to sell them off, and they're going to want to try to get what money back that they, bought them for. So, that's really the way I see that, is those people who, collect video games for 10 years or less, or have been collecting for that amount of time and can't pick up the pace, or they burn out too quick. Those people are investors. That's what, they're in and they're out. It was a flash in the pan. It was a time in their life where they were interested in something, and they got in, they went in hard, they burnt out, and then they moved on. So I think the safest bet in terms of trying to get value back from a game, if you are, is to look at popular franchises and popular consoles and collecting mainstream. A lot of the obscure stuff may go up in price, or could be very rare or very expensive. The problem with it is finding a buyer. If it's too niche, there's not enough people that are going to be interested in spending, a lot of money on a particular game that not a lot of people are interested in. Yeah, a lot of collectors aren't really into the investing thing, but I am seeing more and more people do this. It was something I want to talk about. I'm not saying whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I'll let you guys decide in the comments below. You can talk about, how you feel about this topic. I got a lot of different videos on this channel about video game collecting, so please check them out and subscribe to the channel. It's free to do so. I'll be releasing another video next week that I think you'll enjoy. But for now, that's it. Later, players.